sad news every day in the news, isn't it? Just always. And this morning, one of the first things I saw, too, and I didn't even read the article, I just saw the picture in the headline, but two lovely young girls, and they're, it's the last day of summer, it's ready to go back to school, and both of them lost their lives in some kind of tragic accident. And we just think that, we're always looking and thinking that we've got that day ahead of us. We're looking forward to the future. I remember when I was working at McKesson Robbins there in Lexington, my desk was right behind Carl Eberfeld's. I was the what they call the sundry buyer. He was the head buyer, and I took care of the cosmetics and all of that sort of thing. And then the fellow behind me was a fellow by the name of L.G. Hornsby, and he took care of all the pharmaceutical end. And so we had about 22,000 items that we were buying and tracking and inventorying all the time. And but Carl was over all of it, and he was the head buyer. And I would listen to Carl talk day after day, and he was always planning for the time that he was going to retire. And he had all these plans for what he was going to do when he retired. And one day I was sitting right there behind him, and Carl just reached up and grabbed his head. And he said, "Oh, I have a terrible, terrible headache." And he just put his head down on his desk. And within just a couple of days, he was gone. And, of course, I was very young, and it caused me to just reflect upon that we really need to think about this could be our last day. We never know if we're going to have another day or not. When we're young, we don't like to think about that, but that made it real to me because, he died in just a few days, and they came to me and they said, "We've got to move you into that desk." And I wasn't equipped and I wasn't prepared. It scared me to death that I had to take over as head buyer of the company. But it made such a lasting impression on me that today I still see that, him putting his hands up. He had that red hair, and he put his hands up in his head and said, "Oh, my head hurts so bad." What would you do if you only had one day to live? Did you ever think about that? Listen to what the psalmist said in Psalm 84 and verse 10. He said, "For a day in thy course is better than 1,000. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness." I want you to consider with me tonight for just a few minutes, what if you only had one day to live? What would you do on that day? Do you have something that you've always wished you could do and hoped to do and you plan to do someday, but you just haven't gotten around to it? You might want to do that if you thought you only had one day to live. Or you might think, I really miss my family. So many people move to Florida, and their families are still, in other states, and you might think, boy, if I knew I only had one day to live, I think I'd just get on a plane and go home so I could spend that last day with my family, my loved ones. Or you might have some fantasy dream of something you'd like to do. People call it a bucket list of things they would like to do. I read the other day about a lady who was quite elderly jumping out of an airplane because she just wanted to do that before she died. I thought if I jumped out of an airplane, I probably would die. But anyway, that's what she did. Or if you knew that you just had one day to live, would you just live it like you've lived every other day? You say, "I'm satisfied with the way I've lived, and I'll just take tomorrow as another day." Well, the psalmist in Psalm 84, David concludes that one day in serving God is really better than 1,000 days doing anything else. And it seems to me that David is saying that if he only had one day in which to live, he'd want to spend that day serving the Lord. And, if I had only one day to live, I wonder how I'd want to spend it. I think I'd want to spend it just doing what I'm doing, just serving the Lord. Well, in these verses, David talks about his decision, the reason why he feels that way. And so we're going to look at actually 3 verses tonight as we think on this thought. If I only had one day to live, if I only had one day, I want to. I would want to be found in my place. What did he say? He said, "For a day in thy courts is better than 1,000. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness." I would want to spend my day in a place of service. David tells us he'd rather be a lowly doorkeeper in the house of the Lord than to enjoy all of the wealth and the luxuries of the world. In other words, David is saying He'd rather be found serving the Lord than serving the devil. That's what it boils down to, isn't it? And the Bible makes it very clear that every saint of God has a special place of ministry, of service to the Lord. Paul wrote about it.